Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Metalogic's Quick Takes, where we will provide little bite-sized nuggets of wisdom on different aspects of our various tools. Just a reminder, today's session is being recorded and it can be accessed post-session at the link shown on the slide here at our support portal in the Metalogic's Academy section. My name is Roy Martinez. I'm the lead Metalogic support representative for the SharePoint backup tool. I have several years of experience working with this tool since its original inception and have thus had the opportunity to watch the tool's feature set grow and evolve over the years. So I've pretty much seen it all with this tool, and I'm eager to share some of that expertise with you guys via these quick take sessions. Today's session is regarding SharePoint backup, and we're going to be talking about Granular Restore, the overview of such. And in today's session, we're going to be specifically focused on the mount process, mounting a backup set. This is a new feature in the latest release of the tool, and for longtime users of SharePoint backup, this is the biggest departure from the original code and the way things used to work with Granular Backup and Restore. We've changed things dramatically. And the concept of mounting backup sets is really the biggest change. So just to go over what we'll cover today, we're going to keep it short and sweet, but we're going to talk about mounting backup sets to an instance of SQL, selecting the backup set type. There are several different types of backup sets we will work with, and we'll talk about those different options. Defining the SQL instance to which we're going to be mounting our backup set. Performing the mount itself. There are two aspects to that mount process, part of which is the preparation for the mount and then the actual mount process itself, and we'll talk about the difference between these two operations in real time. We're going to talk about selecting data from within the mount to restore and just show how to navigate through that mounted data and what it looks like in the console. And then we're going to talk about ways to include a mount operation within your scheduled backup, talk about the options for doing so, and also talk about the theory behind why you might want to do something like that. So without further ado, I think it's probably best we just jump right in and start taking a look. I've got a VM here. If any of you were on the previous quick take sessions with me, in the previous we went through the backup process. We did some backups of some content databases. I've taken the liberty of making a new backup today that includes the following content. This includes all of my content databases in this farm. It's a very small farm. It's very light. There's not too much going on, but just as the example, I've in this case selected 4 content databases for my farm, and I've backed them up in this particular backup set called QuickTakes4-mount. So I've backed up my content. I have a backup set out there. Now what? Well, if I were interested in doing direct, complete database restoration, obviously I could go to my Restore tab here and just restore the actual databases themselves directly to SQL, just as a snapshot. So that's going to literally restore the entire database to a point in time of that backup set, and that's one way to approach the idea of disaster recovery. But if we're talking about restoration of specific elements within SharePoint, i.e. site collections, subsites, lists, libraries, even documents within, then it might not be best to, the database restore can only do so much, and it's at the top level. If we want to dig deeper, we're going to need to use our Granular Restore process, which leverages this new mount concept. So as you can see in the overview, I've got nothing mounted, nothing available to restore, even though I have backup sets. And the reason is I have to actually perform that mount process before I'll see things here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Import and Mount tab. We have this ribbon button, Mount and Link Content Database. And we'll get a fancy little wizard to step us through this process. Now the very first option we get is what type of backup set are we mounting? What's the source of this data? And as you can see, there are several different options. The middle option is the most common option. This is our backup set. That means for example, in my scenario here, I've taken a backup using the SharePoint backup tool. I have that backup set out there on a network share somewhere, and I'm going to mount that particular backup set. But as you can see, we can also mount native SQL Server backup files. We can mount directly from MDF and LDF files as located on your SQL Server directories. We can mount a native SharePoint full farm backup, or we can link directly to a live content database in a SQL instance in your SharePoint farm. So there are many different reasons why we might want to use those other options. The most common reason is just to change the way we fit into your disaster recovery scenario. If you already have SQL Server backing up all your content databases and you don't want the redundancy of having SharePoint backup also backing those databases up, you can just as easily use those existing SQL Server backups and restore those granular objects, sites, subsites, lists, libraries, documents from within that SQL Server backup. So that's a pretty cool feature. But for our purposes, we're going to be doing the all-in-one option, which is we've done the backup, we're going to restore our backup and mount from that. So I click Next. And in my next view here, I'm going to select which SQL Server I want to mount to. So I can literally choose any SQL Server I want in my network as long as I have access to it, and as long as that SQL Server host has a SharePoint backup service installed there. So as long as we have a backup service on the SQL Server in question, we can always mount to it. But that is the requirement. We do have to have that backup service to hand off that mount operation to SQL on our behalf. The only thing, I guess the only consideration with this additional requirement is that your license count will have to include and account for that additional backup service. So keep that in mind as you plan your rollout. So I'm going to go to my SharePoint SQL Server, which in my case is just fine, but you may have a dedicated SQL Server on which you want to mount these databases, because at the end of the day, we are mounting databases and they will show as databases in SQL, so there may be SQL Server resource considerations there as well, and I'll show you all that in SQL as we finish. So I click Next, and the next thing I do is select the backup set. So this drop-down shows a list of all the Metalogix SharePoint backup sets that are available in your network share. In my case, I want to use this most recent QuickTakes4-mount backup set from today at, earlier this morning. I'm going to select him, and then we can see the content within. So in my case, I'm just going to mount this one particular content database. I could mount all four if I wanted to, and each would show in SQL Server as a database, but I know the content I want is in this particular content database, so I'm going to go ahead and mount him. Click Next. I give it a name. I give it a description if I want. Pretty standard stuff. I choose the farm to which this is associated, and in my case, I've only got the one farm added in backup, but if you're managing multiple farms with your SharePoint backup installation, you'd have multiple options here, and this just indicates which farm are we going to be ultimately restoring data to. And we have a quick summary of what we've chosen. Notice here this staging path. We'll talk about this in more detail as the operation goes on, but this is a subdirectory on your network location where backups are stored. In my case, that's this backups folder. We create a folder called CDB files, content database files. And what happens when I click mount here, we're going to see a couple of operations pop up in the operation queue. We're going to see a prepare for mount operation and then a mount full farm operation. So that prepare for mount operation, which just completed, what it does is it goes into that network share location to that CDB files directory, and it decompresses the backup set and stores the MDF and LDF files for that content database in that staging directory. This is where SQL is going to be reading the data files from in the mounted database. So if I go to SQL Server Management Studio, and forgive me if this takes a while to load, But as I go into SQL Server Management Studio, I should now see a mounted version of that content database. The other side of that, the other operation in this queue was the actual mount operation, which is essentially our backup service hands off an instruction to the SQL Server that we chose. And that SQL Server service, contacts that staging directory, looks at the data files, and essentially attaches the database or mounts it, so to speak, to the instance. And the result looks something like this. So now I have this. This is the one I just mounted. I've got a few others mounted as well, but as you can see here, our naming convention is ml metalogics _ temp _ db _ content database name. So this is what I just mounted. And it's just basically a live database temporarily set up. So now that that's up and running in SQL, on the console side, if I now go to the Overview tab, I now see that I have Quick Takes for mounted and ready. If I go to the Restore tab, we can see here, once the backup set is selected, I have this view down here for backup content, and I can literally drill down into the site hierarchy as though I were in SharePoint almost. Anyone who's familiar with our content matrix tool may recognize this hierarchy here. But yeah, we can drill in and locate, I don't really have much in my stuff, but locate the various documents, lists, links, libraries, so on and so forth. So that's how you navigate through stuff within the mount. Let's talk a little bit about the options we have for restore. Now I'm not going to do any direct restores because I want that to be in my next quick take session. But essentially what we'll be doing is selecting a library or a document or a site or a list or whatever the case may be. We've got a couple of options up here. We've got restore and quick restore off the bat. Restore will do just like it says. It'll restore and overwrite whatever exists. Quick restore will restore but not overwrite anything other than new delta information from the backup set. In other words, if it already exists, it'll skip it and only restore stuff that isn't already there. Out of place gives us the option to, whenever we go through the restore wizard, select a different web application or different site collection or different location from the original. So in this essence, it's somewhat like a migration, although not nearly as robust. This is content only. Yeah, so we have some options for restore. And that's really basically it for mounting. So what this means is at any point in time, let's say I've got some scheduled backups rolling that happen, fulls on Sunday night and then maybe differentials every day throughout the week, or even differentials every 4 hours or whatever the case may be. At any point in time, if a document, list, library, site, subsite gets deleted or removed or something happens and we've lost some data, we can, as quickly as you just saw, jump in, go through our mount wizard, locate the backup set that we're trying to get stuff from, mount it up, and drill into our data to recover that data. Just do one more mount of 2 just to show you. I mean, it really is pretty quick and painless. So if anyone out there is familiar with the old way of doing it, the original version of SharePoint Backups, Granular Backup and Restore mechanism leveraged SharePoint APIs exclusively, which led to a lot of different scalability issues in terms of just the way it handled large amounts of data. In other words, it didn't handle them. So our solution was to kind of cut the middleman out and do direct. I mean, we're leveraging volume shadow copy to do these snapshots anyway. Why not take the next step? And I think this is a good example of how to best leverage the technology available. So let me see if I've got new backup content here from that other one. Right. So let's say someone had deleted a picture of my favorite band, the Fibonacci's, from the site. I could go in here, select that JPEG, and restore it right back to where it existed in the shared documents library of the Doc Workspace 2 website within site collection X, Y, or Z. So I hope that makes some sense. So departing a little bit from that, let's talk a bit about our scheduled backup. So I mentioned earlier that it's possible to actually include this mount operation as part of your scheduled backup. And so why would I need to do that? Well, picture a scenario wherein you have a, for lack of a better term, warm standby SQL server that represents the place where we want our mounted restorable data to get written to. I can schedule a backup, and I'll just show you in this one. So let's say I'm backing up this content database regularly, or any number of them. And it's happening every Sunday, and differentials are happening every day. If I wanted to, I could include the mount as part of that schedule. Got a couple of options here. I can limit the total size that the content database can be in order to qualify for the mount. And I can limit the total number of mounted databases to keep. This is an interesting feature, and if I keep it at 1, what's going to happen essentially is that every time a differential, a full or differential on the schedule completes, it's going to immediately mount the backup set that just got taken to your standby SQL server, never going over 1. So in this scenario, every time a diff takes place, the mounted database will be replaced by the most recent backup set. What that means functionally for the end user is that at any given time, we would be able to go into our Granular Restore tab to the mounted databases and see the very most recently backed up data at all times. So this is really helpful if you're doing like high availability stuff that needs to be backed up every 2 hours. For disaster aversion, you can always, the idea is as soon as you open the console, the first thing you see in the restore section is the very most recent backup set, no matter what. And it's really for the more high availability scenarios out there. But in general, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is you have the option of either set and forget mode with the scheduled backup, or just manually go in here and mount as needed. As you can see, the mount process is pretty simple and quick, so it's neither here nor there really, but it's just a matter of what you need. So I've hit, I think, the 20-minute mark, so at this point I will open the floor to questioning if there is any. If anyone has any questions, throw them out to me in the chat or question window, and if not, then I will wrap it up at that point and invite you all to contact us at support@metalogix.com if you have further questions, or visit our website, our support portal. You can always give us a call at 202-609-9100. And I hope this information was informative. Next time we're going to talk about the actual restore process, and we're going to look at some actual example restores, both in place and out of place, and from the farm level and the mounted granular level. So again, thanks everybody for your time. I hope this was helpful, and let us know if you have any questions. Take care.